रीड से पहले आप वो करवाना, तिलावत करवाने आपको ट्रांसलेट करना।
Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to an online interactive session on Islamic holistic health and how we will be learning that to live healthy, meaningful living through Islamic holistic health. So before we start this session, I would like to invite Mr. Arif Nafeuddin Siddiqui to do the tilawat of Holy Quran, and then we follow with the session.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحيم لا يستوي أصحاب النار وأصحاب الجنة أصحاب الجنة هم الفائزون لو أمثال نضربها للناس لعلهم يتفكرون هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم صدق الله العظيم
Jazakallah Arif. Now we'll be following with our session. And before starting, I would like to introduce our honored guest speaker. His name is Shaikh Hashim Ahmed, and he is an American Islamic scholar, and uh, he holds a degree from Jami'ah Ummul Quran from Makkah Al Mukarramah with specialization in sciences of Quran and Hadith. Apart from that, he is also teaching at various Islamic institutes. He also delivers lectures at diverse places, and he guides to Muslims that how can we live our life in a healthy way, in a holistic manner. So, please, Sheikh Saab, uh, would like you to continue with the session. Jazakallah.
Okay. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I hope voice is coming through clearly. Can we just confirm that? Yes? Can someone kindly just confirm that the voice is coming through okay? So I assume it is. So Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidil Mursaleen, wa ala alihi wa sahabati ajmain, amma ba'd. So this presentation is basically about a hayat at-tayyiba, a beautiful and blessed life, and how we can live a beautiful, blessed life through the medium of healthy and meaningful living. So this is kind of a summary of a approximately half-day workshop that I conduct. And so we'll just kind of touch some highlights of it, and perhaps at another time in the near future, we might be able to collectively actually have that workshop together, perhaps online or perhaps in person. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it happen one day. So this is for the entrance. Actually, it's a series of courses on various aspects of holistic health. And so this is basically an entrance, sort of an overview and interview, a intro to the whole program. So this is session 1. First of all, we would like to ask this question: why am I here? You know, before we get into any other issue, why don't we come to the core issue of what's the purpose of our creation? Why are we here in this world? And it's very interesting that, you know, if we ask what is the purpose of anything in this world, or why am I here in class, or why do I go to work every day? You know, generally people don't have a problem with that. But when we ask, like, why am I here in this world? You know, what's the purpose of my life? Amazingly, you know, which should be the core focus of every human being on the planet. And yet either we never even thought about that, or it's beyond our thinking capacity, or we don't have a clue, but it's very perplexing. And fitratan, you know, the human nature will ultimately ask this. I mean, okay, why am I here? Everything has a purpose. So what is my purpose? And it's even more interesting that the human intellect is actually not prepared. It's not equipped, as it were, to answer this question. Amazing, right? It's such a fundamental question, but the human intellect cannot answer this. You know, what's the purpose of the human being on the planet? The human intellect cannot answer this question. And if you don't believe me, go to any university and go to the PhD departments, your graduate studies, and ask people who are not grounded in divine sciences. Just ask them this question and see what kind of answers you get. So what's even more perplexing than all of that is that I find that Muslims who shouldn't have any issue whatsoever with this question, Muslims have a problem with this. You know, what's the, you know, people like, well, I know what I'm supposed to answer, but do I really believe that? Do I really feel that's relevant? So, as I mentioned earlier, the human intellect cannot answer this question. The answer to this question requires divine guidance. It requires revelation. And therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been so kind to us, making us human beings and making us Muslims, and sending us the Holy Quran, which, among every other type of guidance, the very fundamental purpose of our existence is also very succinctly and very clearly described. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون. Basically, it translates something more or less like this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and I have created not the jinn and the mankind except for my worship, servitude, moreover my ubudiyah. Illa liya'budun, except to continuously be engaged in ubudiyah, which I'm going to explain a little bit more in detail, inshallah. So we'll go back to here. I hope you see the pointer here. So I've highlighted this illa liya'budun in yellow. And this is the key to the whole thing. I have not created the jinn and the man except for this, liya'budun. And so this ya'budun is basically, it's a verbal construct. So, and we say in the Arabic language, it's a fi'l mudariya. Fi'l mudariya is the continuous tense, continuous and ongoing future tense, like from now until ever. So we have been created to continuously be engaged in ubudiyah. Okay? Illa liya'budun, to be continuously engaged in this ubudiyah. And ubudiyah is basically about being a slave. We're not free, It's not like it's my body, it's my wealth, it's my, I do what I want. No. You didn't create your body, you didn't create your mind. The resources that you have at your disposal are not yours. They're actually, it's all an amanat from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the master, He's the creator, we are His creation, and we are His slaves and servants. So the consciousness that we are actually slaves and behaving appropriately, this is called ubudiyah, basically. And so, in a little more clarity, with a little more clarity, so ubudiyah is basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's obedience and servitude out of His love and reverence. Because, not because we have to, but because we want to. We recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's beneficence in creating us and creating everything that we have and giving us bounties which cannot be computed by the computer systems of the universe. And so out of this recognition, a deep love and reverence is developed for our creator and our sustainer, Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. And so therefore we serve Him willingly and lovingly. This is ubudiyah. And this ubudiyah, it requires three very basic terms that we all know, but we just have to make sure that we understand exactly what they mean. Number one, Islam. What does Islam mean? If the Arabic language is not our mother tongue, sometimes we have a problem with this. Islam, well, it's religion. I mean, it's, religion, like some people say it means salam. Well, it doesn't really mean salam. It doesn't really mean peace. It actually means submission. Submission to Allah in this case. And of course, we wouldn't get any peace without submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So yes, salam is a word which is connected to the same root, but Islam, aslama yuslimu islaman, is actually submission. Submission. And in this case, specific submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so then what is a Muslim? So Muslim is actually the active participle of Islam. So he is actually the one who submits to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the one who actually submits to Allah. And this needs clarification, So submitting totally, partially, or so how does that work? And what's the ruling in all these cases? We talk about this in detail in our workshop, inshallah. Hopefully we'll have that one time. And then lastly, we need to understand Deen. What is Deen? We all say, what is your Deen? Our Deen is Islam. So what is Deen? So Deen is basically this total system of submission, this total and complete submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so that has a huge scope. And in fact, it entails everything. All activities of life, all roles in life, every single thing that we do. And along with a balance. There needs to be a balance among all of these activities and all of these roles. And so Deen is going to show us how to do that. It's going to give us guidance and it's going to show us how to do that. If you like, you could say Deen is actually an operational application of ubudiyah. That whole concept of ubudiyah, the concept of being Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's slave and servant, 24/7, 365, being attentive to Him and understanding what He wants from us at any given moment in time and applying that. So Deen is that total system of application, how to properly and how to appropriately apply our ubudiyah in every instance of our existence. So here we have a diagram, which this is actually a diagram that we use in the workshop, and it's basically the basis of a very, very powerful exercise that's probably the most important and most powerful exercise of the workshop, and it takes usually about an hour or so to do this, but it's extremely important, and it's basically based, it's not out of my head or anybody else's head, it's basically based on two ayats. Number one, the whole graphic here, is basically the whole system of ubudiyah graphically illustrated based on the ayat of Surah Ibrahim, verse 24, which talks about the example of the kalima, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, when it's alive and operating, in the heart of a mu'min or mu'mina. And then how is the process of developing that kalima? That's based on another ayat from Surah Ali Imran, verse 164. And so we go into a very interactive session, and we break up into groups and we discuss this, and it's a very powerful exercise. I hope that we'll have the opportunity to go through it together, inshallah. So basically, the summary, the purpose of life is Ubdiyah. That's why we're here. And the objective of life, so if we put into practice the purpose of this life, we live a life of Ubdiyah. So what's the object? So what's in it for us, by human nature? Okay, what's in it for me? What's in it for me is the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his paradise. Ridullah and paradise, Jannah. So basically, if we live our life of Ubudiyah as we are ordered to do and instructed to do, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the time of our death will grace us with this proclamation, Ya ayyatuhan nafs al-mutma'inna, O you soul at peace, irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyah, return to your Lord, pleased and pleasing to him. Fadkhuli fi ibadi, enter among my slaves. This is very interesting and very significant here. Enter among my slaves. So in paradise, it's a place where all the slaves will be collected. If you're not a slave in this world, you don't have the right to enter into paradise. However, if we live a life of slavery in this world and we enter among the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in paradise, then we'll be freed men and women forever and ever. وَلَكُمْ فِيهَا مَا تَشْتَهِي أَنفُسُكُمْ. You'll have over there whatever your hearts desire, total freedom, forever and ever and ever in every sense. وَلَكُمْ فِيهَا مَا تَدْعُونَ. And you'll have whatever you ask for. Even you'll be told about things that you never even imagined. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, well, ask for this and this and this. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in the Hadith al-Qudsi that he has prepared for his righteous servants that which no eye has ever seen, no ear has ever heard. It has never actually entered into the wildest fancies of any human mind. So that's forever and ever. So a little time, a very short period of time of a life of slavery will lead to an eternity of total and unprecedented freedom. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all, that's sublime and that's supreme success. Wadkhuli jannati, fadkhuli fi ibadi, wadkhuli jannati, enter into my paradise. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all. Okay, then session 2. Let's go back to the very, the basic title of the whole session, which is Hayat al-Tayyibah, the basis of this blessed life that we're talking about. And we basically sort of tag it with this tag, healthy, meaningful living, HML, if you will. So healthy, meaningful living, HML. So what is that all about? Well, according to the Holy Quran, in very unambiguous terms, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions very succinctly again that a life of Iman and Amal is actually the basis of the blessed life. The Hayat al-Tayyibah is based on these two things, Iman and Amal Salih. And that's not what I have to say. This is what Allah Jalla Jalaluhu says. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم من عمل صالحا من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن فلنحيينه حياة طيبة. There's your Hayat al-Tayyibah. فلنحيينه حياة طيبة وَلَنَجْزِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْرَهُمْ بِأَحْسَنِ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. Whosoever works righteousness, there's your Amal Salih, whether man or woman, while being a believer in the state of Iman, we will verily enliven him with a blessed, beautiful, pure way of life. Hayatan Tayyibah. Tayyibah, it has all of these meanings and much more, as a matter of fact. Hayatan tayyibah, blessed, beautiful, pure, wonderful, awesome. There's no end to the adjectives that you can apply here. And we'll reward them by the measure of the best of what they have been doing. Allahu Akbar. The very best that we have been doing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant us accordingly. So basically, a hayat at-tayyibah, healthy, meaningful living, is a life of Iman and Amal salih. Okay, so let's go back and try and break that down in the context of what we're talking about, specifically. So healthy, meaningful living. So what do these three elements imply? So we've got healthy. What does that imply when we say healthy? When we say meaningful, what does this imply? Living, what type of lifestyle are we looking at? So let's first of all look at meaningful. Meaningful is basically, as we talked about in session 1, it's having a clear purpose of existence. We know why we're here. We're clearly aware of why we have been created, and we're trying to live that purpose. So that's a meaningful life when we have a clear purpose of existence. If we don't know why we're here, then our life really has no meaning. So if our life has no meaning, then it doesn't matter really whether we're healthy or unhealthy. That alone is total unhealth, as it were. Now, healthy. If we think about healthy, like if I were to ask any of you, okay, when I say this word healthy, what comes to mind? This guy's healthy, or she's healthy, or he is unhealthy, or so what comes to mind when we think about that? So generally we have an interaction, we have a little discussion on this. So let's go to a hadith of Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam and see what he has to say about this, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam says, a mu'min al-qawi khayrun wa ahabbu ila Allahi min al-mu'min al-dhaif. So Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam says, basically, a strong believer, a healthy believer, if you will, is more virtuous and more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than a weak believer. So a strong believer, a healthy believer, he's more virtuous, he has more virtue in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves him more. So is this something which is genetic, which is, as we say, non-iktisabi? I mean, we had no dakhal, we had no say in the matter, no play in the matter. So how would that make us more virtuous or more beloved? Or is this something that we, by our own intervention, by the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obviously, but through our choice of action, we have become more healthy, more strong. So obviously it would be something that we have our own choice in the matter. Otherwise, there's no question of us being more virtuous or more beloved when it's not something that we have actually done ourselves and therefore qualify. So what type of strength are we talking about? What type of health are we talking about here? What type of strength and health is Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam referring to that makes him more virtuous and more beloved? So here also we generally have a sort of discussion, and people, give their ideas or opinions or what they would perceive in that sense, in that context. However, there's multi-dimensions here. So all of these dimensions contribute to the health and the strength and make a believer, make a person of Iman stronger and more virtuous and more beloved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number one, his spiritual strength, Rouhani strength. So Rouhani health and Rouhani strength is pivotal, and therefore we give it a special sort of glow here, because that's the driver of all of these other dimensions. Then we have the dimension of the intellect, aqlani, intellectual health. Intellectual health is also very critical. A mu'min who is strong intellectually is obviously more virtuous and more beloved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Physical strength as well. Physical health. Having a strong and healthy physical body is going to supplement, it's going to support a strong intellect. It's going to support as well and facilitate a strong spiritual existence. Emotional health, nafsani health. that is extremely critical, particularly in today's life that we live in today's world where everyone is emotionally extremely upset, generally speaking. So having balance and having emotional health is extremely critical, and it's going to impact all these others. And that's looking at the micro, the individual, his own spiritual, intellectual, physical, emotional health and well-being and strength. And then we move on to the macro, the interactive. We go to the social, ijtimai. We're not living here alone. We're living in relationship to other human beings. And that goes also from a micro to a macro, the family unit, the community, the country, the globe, And then the ultimate macro, the environmental health. And going back to this ijtimai, so having strong social connections and social relationships is obviously going to have a huge impact on all these other dimensions as well. So we need to be strong and healthy here. And what about our environment? If the environment is destroyed, then there's no place for all of this health to actually be displayed. It's not going to be manifest. It will no longer have a stage, a stage to play itself out. So the environment, environmental health is something that, is also something that supports general health all around across the table. So any one of these areas, spiritual health, intellectual health, physical health, emotional health, ijtimai health, social health, environmental health, each one of these areas is a topic of unlimited information and unlimited study. And we could spend our lifetimes, multiple lifetimes on any one of them continuously. So what we tried to do is, and actually as as trained as a religious instructor or instructor in the sciences, the religious sciences, Islamic sciences of Quran and Hadith and fiqh, etc., the Arabic language, etc. So for decades teaching in the traditional, as we say, madaris, or the traditional Islamic institutions. So I found we had a very small crowd, very specific crowd, and also a lot of things that we were learning and studying and trying to understand and getting our heads around and teaching them, and it's a continuous process. They're actually not finding their way into the areas of practical application. For example, in the area of business, we study in the madrasa in detail about all the various aspects of business and the Islamic injunctions from the standpoint of the Quran and Hadith and fiqh, etc. However, Muslim businessmen and Muslim businesswomen in the marketplaces don't have a clue of any of that. And generally, since we don't have much connection with them, we don't really know the issues that they're facing. And they also don't have a clue of what we're studying and learning, in the madrasa. So it's like, everybody's living in their own little space, and it's one side is not benefiting the other. So it became really a sort of a dilemma to me that since this religion and the teachings of Islam are this total life of Ubdiyah, which needs to be understood and applied in all aspects of life. So how are we going to practically be able to do that, particularly in our modern context? There was a time when Muslims actually were doing that. So what's necessary is we come up with formats, and we come up with programs that can break it down to the level of the layman in terms of his time, in terms of its complexity, etc., and practicality for that matter. So for that, we developed a whole system of business, which we call the Ubdiyah business model. I'll mention that at the very end, very briefly. So like this, in every sphere, we need to actually have a whole sort of system to break it down and train, people in those sectors, whether it's business, whether it's agriculture, whether it's the military, whether it's social, services, whether it's whatever sector people are living, health and the medical profession, whatever, education. So all of these areas need to have practical systems to show people how to practically do things in their everyday context. So similarly, these dimensions of health, spiritual, intellectual, physical, emotional, etc. So I thought that these are areas all that we should have at least some basic hands-on things. The common Muslim should be able to have some basic tools in these realms and these dimensions that would, give him some basis here and make life much easier for him and get him started on the way. So for this, I developed a series of courses, which is known as the Healthy, Meaningful Living through Islamic Holistic Health. And in these trainings, we look at each of these dimensions, and we come up with a whole sort of training system that will kind of break it down and give people some hands-on things that's going to help them out. So I'll just give you a little overview of these 6 dimensions and what we learn in those various courses. So in terms of Rouhani health, what we call the Siha Rouhaniya. So number 1, we learn about Iman, which is the very basis. We said the basis of a blessed life is Iman and Amal Salih. So we look at Iman, not just, it's belief. Let's break it down. Let's understand what's the importance of Iman. What's the impact of Iman, not only in the next world, in this world itself. And there's specifics from Quran and Sunnah that graphically illustrate this. So we need to know that. We need to be impacted by it. We need to really understand what is Iman, what's its definition, what's the reality of Iman. So we go into that into detail, but a detail that, the common people can understand and get their heads around, and hopefully their hearts around as well. How to build that Iman, how to strengthen that Iman, how to protect it. It's such a valuable thing. So building it, strengthening it, protecting it, we also learn some hands-on things that we can do in that regard, which is extremely critical, obviously. And the Rouhani Amal, the actions, the activities that strengthen our Iman and are directly connected to the Ruh, which, if you like, the ritual worship, that we have been instructed to do. Our salat, our Quran, dhikr, salat ala nabi alayhi salatu, istighfar, dua, fikr of death, tawbah. So not just, learning, what are these things and what are the ahkam of these things and so forth and so on. Moreover, we look at how to develop a salat that's really going to change our lives. A salat that, with khushu and khudu', that's going to, save us from fahshay wal munkar. It will transform our life towards a life of servitude and a life that will, a life that's far away from, lewd and iniquitous action. The Quran, how do we develop a relationship with Quran? How do we develop a relationship in terms of our reading of the Quran, understanding the Quran, implementing the Quran? So we go into that into detail. There's exercises in this so that we can start getting a strong connection with the Quran and learn how to read the Quran with its etiquettes, Dhikr, not just remembering the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through a particular formula, but what's the kayfiyat? What is the condition of mind and heart that we should have? How can we prepare ourselves to enter into really remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with that in that condition of mind and heart that's going to really have an impact and be life-changing. Salat ala nabi alayhi salatu, similarly, what type of condition of mind and heart should we be actually offering this? What should be going on in our minds? Istighfar also. How to actually, perform dua? What should our mind and heart set be there? What are the etiquettes, involved? Fikr of death. Actually, out here in where I live, out in Hawke's Bay, when we have this, workshop live out here, I generally take people out into the desert, behind my house, because I live in a village, and right behind my village is a desert. And I take people out there, and we actually do a very, very sort of, very impactful whole exercise of fikr of death. And it's a wonderful exercise, something we should be doing all the time, because death is the one certainty and the only certainty of life. There's only one certainty of life, and that is death. So we need to be preparing for it. So we need to be thinking about it often. So, we do that exercise. Tawbah is a continuous, constant return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we talk about that, we learn how to do Tawbah, and we actually try and practice it and decide to actually put it into our lives. So that training we do, it's generally, when we do that training in a retreat form, it's usually 2 to 3 days continuous. So perhaps, inshallah, we'll have an opportunity to do that together, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So it's a combination of theory and both practical exercises. So it's not just some information we're learning, but we're doing practical exercises to learn how to do these things practically. In physical health, again, There's theory and then there's practicals. So first of all, we look at the Quran and Sunnah. I mean, is physical health something that Islam talks about? Is it in Quran? Is it in Sunnah? Do our ulama, did they yes, they had a lot to say about that. And it was critical because obviously, a strong body is going to facilitate a strong mind in a strong state of ubudiyah. And a body which is riddled with all types of difficulties and calamities and sicknesses and illnesses and weaknesses, it's going to be very difficult to live a life of ubudiyah of any measure. So we'll find that the Quran, the Sunnah, the view of the ulama and specialists of our time as well. So we look into these into what is being said from all of these sources and the impact that it should be having on us. So we'll look at health, physical health, number one, from the standpoint of movement and rest. To be healthy physically, we need to have particular, we need to have particular modules of movement. We need to have particular rest patterns. We need to be on the move, and we need to also have proper rest and relaxation. So we go into that into detail and look at what's going to actually facilitate, and maximize, our well-being, our physical well-being, and what we need to be implementing and what we need to be putting into our lifestyle in terms of movement, exercise, activity, at the same time rest, sleep patterns, and when, how, and so forth. Nourishment and hunger. Diet, what we should be eating, what we shouldn't be eating, times and quantities, and the various, types of nutrients that we should be, actually putting into our body, what kind of impact they have on. At the same time, hunger. Hunger is actually the default mode, not eating, which seems to be the opposite of what we're doing, most of us. And that itself, is the cause of a lot of trauma and travail, because we have this nonstop eating, which is giving us nonstop problems. So we have to look at not eating as much as we look at eating, being hungry, and at the same time, when we do nourish ourselves, how and what and how much do we nourish ourselves. So we look at that in detail. And also cure and prevention from a very natural and organic and very, a very simple way. If we're living a simple and very organic and very simple and natural and connected lifestyle, we're not going to have to be doing much cure because we have focused on prevention. And when we do need cures, then what type of cures might we be looking into? We go into that into detail. So we have exercise on all these areas, various exercises that we do, and which explains and illustrates these various areas. And then we come up with practical plans. If you don't have a plan, as they say, if you fail to plan, basically you're planning to fail. So we need to have practical and doable, plans of inflammation in terms of our exercise regimens, in terms of our resting, our sleep patterns, in terms of our diet, etc. We need to have practical plans that are doable. So we work on those plans, and inshallah, by the end of the training, we should have practical plans. And then we, in our mentoring and coaching, we go over that and see how we're doing on that, and try and keep ourselves, moving in the right direction. Intellectual health. So also, it's again, we have theory, we have practicals. What we cover, first of all, we look at the 3 tiers of knowledge. So why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us knowledge in the first place? And why did he give us a type of knowledge that is above and beyond all the rest of the creation, as a matter of fact? So that's primarily so that we would know about Allah Jalla Jalalu like no other creation. So we look into that in detail, and what do we mean by knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Al-ilmu billah. To know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to know about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, aqaid, etc. Marifa, aqaid. So we look into that in detail, practically, things that everybody needs to know and how we can develop that. Okay, and then once we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need to know His commands, as we said, a life of ubudiyah, a life of operational ubudiyah, every moment, what am I supposed to be doing and how do I do it? The commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in each and every aspect of my life. So we need to look, we need knowledge on all of these things. Okay? And also, we're physical human beings who live in the world, and this is the place of our test and trial. So we actually have physical, connections here in this world. And those physical connections also support, our life of ubudiyah. So that would translate into our jobs, our professions, our means of livelihood. And these also are connected to our greater objective of a life of Ubudiyah. So these means of livelihood as well, they should also be part and parcel of our life of Ubudiyah. And in so much as they are, so we need to also learn them and practice them and apply them in the very best possible means. So even our jobs and our professions, our crafts, etc., they also are to be studied and done with excellence, and that's also part. But those are the three tiers in their in their their positions of priority. So our first priority is to know about Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, but we're so busy, physically, sustaining ourselves, earning, and thinking, where am I going to eat from? So we're so busy in that third level, we don't have any time for the number one and number two, which are actually take precedence and have a higher priority. So we need to break that down, and we need to actually take a gap analysis. I mean, where do I stand in terms of my knowledge of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala? This is critical. And how much do I know about what I'm supposed to be doing in terms of His commands? So we go through a little gap analysis and see where we stand there, basically. And then once we do a gap analysis, then we're gonna have to, try and fill these gaps. How can I practically learn what I need to know about Allah Subhanahu wa Taala? How can I practically learn the commands of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala that are connected to me, that I have to apply on a daily basis? And then similarly, the gaps that I might have in terms of, performing my profession or my job or my means of livelihood or other things that I have to deal with in my physical existence with excellence as well. I should be the best in everything that I do. Okay? So that intellectual, that's also about a 1-day workshop that we do on that, and we go through this information. Emotional health, Allahu Akbar. I mean, it's critical at any time in history, but in this particular time when we face so many unprecedented challenges, I mean, emotionally, we are just so distraught, most of us, under such stress and tension, as I said, unprecedented. So, and everybody's really basically looking to just be happy, basically, I just looking for satisfaction. I just want to live a happy life, but we're not getting it. And primarily because we don't know where it lies. So we look into, and this is a very interesting, this is a very sort of an interesting topic. And we actually look at studies, clinical studies that have been done and research. It shows graphically that happiness is not where people think it is. It's not in physical things. It's somewhere else. And it's exactly where the Quran says it is, and exactly where our Nabi Alayhi Sallam says it is. And we go into that in detail. Okay, secondly, human cognition, thinking. Our process of thinking, how we think about things, is basically, it pivots on how we perceive things, our perception, how we look at things and how we perceive things. And a lot of times, the way in which we perceive things may not actually be correct. It might be tainted, it might be influenced, it might be skewed for whatever reason. And this has a direct impact on our thinking process. And how we think is going to translate into action. And it's going to translate into, our position in life and in the next life as well. So how we think, our thinking processes, how we perceive things, this is critical to analyze that and be cognizant of our cognizance, how we're thinking, how we're perceiving things. And is it correct, or we need to revisit how we're thinking and perceiving things and perhaps correct it? So we look at some very practical steps that we can take to, sort of examine our thinking and our perception and, inshallah, bring it into a more correct and very fundamentally proper perspective, inshallah. Emotional intelligence. This is extremely critical. I need to understand, first of all, my own emotions. Are emotions good, bad, or otherwise, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us, so they have their purpose. They do have their purpose, but we need to be the master of our emotions, not the other way around, which is generally the case. Our emotions are, that's just the way I am, well, that's my nature. I can't help it. You can help it. If you couldn't help it, you wouldn't be mukallaf, and there wouldn't be Jannah and Jahannam, because, we're all majboor, as they say. We can't help it. No, we can help it. Albeit, it requires effort. It requires understanding. It requires an effort. It requires, sacrifices, etc. But we can do it. So we need to understand our emotions, and we need to become the masters and control of our emotions, not the other way around. At the same time, for our relations with others, we need to understand their emotions, you know? And in these emotions, what triggers good emotions, what triggers bad emotions, or flares up these things, we need to understand that in others as well. And a lot of times, because of our very sort of vulgar, you know, uh, disregard for other people's emotions, we cause huge amounts of calamity and catastrophes, as a matter of fact, because we don't understand other people's emotions, and we don't treat them accordingly. So we need to understand our emotions, we need to understand other people's emotions, and how to deal with those, and how to interact effectively and amiably. And then last but not least, well, not last, but a very critical dimension is obviously the nafs. And now it's become, they're starting to get an idea about that in modern psychology. But this is very core to Islamic teaching from the very beginning. Our Nabi alayhi sallam, the Quran itself, and our Nabi alayhi sallam has given us amazing basic guidelines how to bring our nafs, bring our egos, bring ourselves, our nafs. Actually, it's more than ego, it's more than just self. Nafs, it has its own definition, which is above and beyond that. But in any case, how to bring that under control again, you know? And nafs is very much connected with emotions. So behavioral training, how to train the nafs, to do what it should be doing and not running our lives, but we, come into control of their nafs. So behavioral training of the nafs, this has gone into a very practical, what are some practical things or practical ways that we can start getting control of our nafs. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give me and all of us tawfiq. And then last but not least, relationships with empathy. Having our relationships on the basis of empathy, whoever they are, and we go into this in more detail also in the social module. So this is a couple of days we have this training, and I was very fortunate to have a very dear friend of mine and a close colleague, an alim who's a very astute psychiatrist as well in the States, that basically developed this module for me. And I just told him basically what I want, and he developed it. It's basically his work, and I sort of train it. I do the training with it, but it's an amazing module. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq that one day we'll go through that together, inshallah. Okay, social health. Again, now we're moving towards the macro. Number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's amazing social engineering. The very fact that we are social beings, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala engineered our social, interactions and our social universe. It's just amazing. So we stand back and just sort of observe that, and just, kind of put ourselves in a state of awe in looking at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has engineered this social construct of human society. It's just a mind-boggling. And that will, it's a bayat, it advocates shukr, and a gratitude, and the sense of increases our, consideration of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's magnificence. Allahu Akbar. And then we look at the chain of subordination. Our social constructs, our social interaction. Do we have like hierarchy? We have anarchy, or what are we supposed? How are we supposed to be living? So we have hierarchy in Islam. There's a chain of subordination, but it's not just, as they say, kayfa mattafaq, however it happens, it's not like, like, for example, in our modern world, it's like democracy. That's what subordination is all about. I mean, we have to, whatever the majority says, that's what we need to do. Take a vote. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَكِنْ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Most of the people, they don't know. They haven't got a clue really what's supposed to be happening. If you follow most of the people on the face of the earth, they're going to take you off the track of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you're off the track of Allah, then on what track are you going to be? You're going to be on the track of shaitan, and we know where that's going to end up. So we definitely don't want to be on that path. So there's a hierarchy. There's on the principles of justice, which were graphically illustrated during the time of Nubuwwat and during the time of Nabi alayhi salatu, the time of Khulafa ar-Rashidin. I mean, we have an example that shows exactly what real a real chain of subordination based on the principles of justice really can be and really looks like. So now it's up to us to replicate that, to understand and replicate that. So we look at that in a bit of detail, and then there's social relationship constructors and there's destructors. There's things, and amazingly, very simple interventions that if we're aware of, they can have amazing dynamic impact on developing relationships and building relationships. Very simple things. At the same time, there's things that we're not even cognizant of sometimes. They're very simple things that we're doing that are just destroying relationships. And if we were aware of those and we kind of focus on that, we could save ourselves from a lot of travail. You know, for example, people think it's socially cheek, or socially, you be the talk of the gathering when you're good at joking and making fun of everybody. Making a joke about him and her and he and them, and basically what it is, it's sticking them, in the back, or making fun of people. It's generally taunting and and this is absolutely haram, and it destroys relationships. Just for the sake of somebody to make somebody laugh, you can be destroying relationships. It can even go to the point of of the flow of blood. So Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam has given us amazing, the Quran itself and Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam and our ulama have given us very simple guidelines that if we are aware of them and try and implement them, it will just work wonders for our social constructs. So we go through a list of these things and see how we can put those into practice. Digital addiction, Allahu Akbar. This is what is destroying the very fabric of society. I mean, it's a dilemma. It's the dilemma of the 21st century. It is unprecedented. The world has never seen anything like it. And so we go into that into detail. We look at to see to what extent it's not just wasting our time. It's not just skewing our intellects. It even has the far-reaching impact on our genetic makeup. I mean, it's impacting all of the dimensions of human health. So this is a very serious thing. So we need, for digital addiction, we need digital dieting. We need digital control. So we look into that. How is that possible? What can we do to actually get a hold of this? We can't, probably most of us may not live without it. It would be wonderful if we could, but how do we live with it and don't be controlled by it? So, let it not be an addiction. Let it be something, a tool that we use, not a sword that we cut with, not a sword that's cutting us. And then specific social relationships. Now we get onto the nitty gritty, the nuts and the bolts. Husband and wife, parents and children, blood relationships, in-laws, employees, neighbors, fellow countrymen, Muslims in relationship to non-Muslims who are friendly, non-Muslims who are antagonistic. I mean, what are the rights and what are the challenges in each one of these constructs? So we look into each one of these with a little bit of detail so we can see practically what type of rights, do we have in these, or do others have upon us in these constructs? What type of challenges do we generally face? And we have, we get into discussions on that. People bring up their own challenges and we try and look for solutions and how we can deal with these challenges. So it's a very powerful part of that training. And last but not least, environmental health. As I said, if we're healthy in all of our, in all of our micro dimensions, we're spiritually, physically, it's all working fine, but we don't have a planet to live on. So then what? So obviously, the dimensions of the environment, physical, spiritual, moral, and ethical. It's not just the physical environment, but spiritually, morally, ethically, these are all dimensions of our environment. And we as human beings, we are vice regents of this earth. Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa. We are khulafa upon the earth, which means that we're also khulafa of the earth itself. And so being khulafa of the earth and being vice regents of the earth and its implications in terms of our vice regency of the earth itself. So we're responsible for this earth. And unfortunately, we Muslims, like everything else, we tend to be, behind the crowd. Other people are really taking this seriously. We don't tend to take this very seriously, and we need to. We should be out there, right up there in the front lines, like everything else. Practical steps for improving the environment. So people say, well, wait a minute, so I'm not a government. This is government policy and whatnot. They can change it. Look, everybody has an impact. Just to give you an idea, we all make wudu, right? So we all make wudu 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 times a day. How much water do we use every day? Here in Pakistan, they say we're water stressed. As a matter of fact, they say that Pakistan is the fourth most water stressed nation in the world. Now this is very amazing. Looking at the fact that you've got 5 huge rivers, that's why you've got this Punjab, five rivers. You've got flowing down. You've got some of the heaviest glacier concentration on the planet. You've got 9 of the highest peaks after Mount Everest in Pakistan. You've got huge amounts of glaciers feeding you water. You've got huge amounts of water being poured on us every year in the monsoon rains. So we don't have we're not stressed. We have water surplus. We are wasting. We are in a water wastage. We're not in a water, we're not in a water stress situation. So going back to the wudu. So we're all making wudu. So what we do in this training, we just tell somebody to go make wudu. So somebody opens on the tap and we put a bucket under the tap. So the person is making wudu. And by the time he gets done with wudu, we've got about 3, 4, 5 liters of water in the bucket, which means those 3 or 4, 5 liters that were in the bucket, they otherwise would have went down the drain and gone into the sewage system. So suppose he's wasting 3 liters a day. And then after they do that, actually, we give them a little bottle of a half liter of water. Say, okay, now make wudu with this. And we don't show you how or what you have to do. So the person, he thinks about it. And, human beings are basically intelligent. So they figure out how to do it. And they very carefully make wudu with a half liter of water, total wudu. So that means out of 3, suppose 3 liters of water that we're usually using to make our wudu, 2.5 are wasted. So say 2.5, 3 liters are wasted in every wudu. So every day I'm wasting at least about 15 liters a day. So take Karachi, for example, times 20 million people, at least what percentage, say even half of them, say 10 million of them are offering salat and making wudu. So 10 billion times 15 liters every day, how much water is wasted every day just in wudu? So like this, there's a lot of things that we're doing with water, with waste, with leftover food, with energy, and so forth and so on. There's things that we can all do to have a huge impact, collectively, So we look at these practical things that we can do, and we find there's a lot that we can do to improve the environment. And then we do an introduction to a discipline, which is a total holistic system of environmental protection and reversal. Reversal of the damage that we've done, which is known as permaculture. A little homework I can give everybody. Probably you're not aware of this term, permaculture. So please take note of this, permaculture. Okay, write it down. And your homework is to look up this term, permaculture, and you'll get a little idea about it. Okay, I'm also a student of permaculture. My mother is a student of permaculture. My mother's in her 90s, and she's an organic gardener, an organic, healthy living person, and she's got basically nothing wrong with her other than she's wearing out, My father as well. He's also still alive in his 90s. So anyway, so this permaculture is a whole system which is basically teaches us how to go from an unsustainable environmental destruction process, is what we're seeing today. Everybody's just wantonly destroying all the resources because we don't know how to live like human beings. Naturally, we don't know how to live with the resources that Allah has given us. Whether it be energy, whether it be water, whether it be the land, whether it be building structures, whether it be how we're living together, how should the size of our communities be, et cetera, et cetera. So going from that destructive and unsustainable way of living towards a sustainable environmental abundance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us plenty of everything. It's just how we use it. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us, like millions of gallons of water for X amount of people to use over the period of a year, for example. So if we just turn on the drain and just open up the the threshold and just let it flow out in 1 hour, so that's our fault. We have the resources, but if we squander them, then obviously it's not going to sustain, and that's what we see today. So this whole system of permaculture is a whole, it's a whole system, of turning around the whole, destruction of the planet that we're doing, and you know just looking at all of these various areas and how we can reverse the whole thing by taking some steps and living in the environment and doing some simple things to become much more sustainable. And so we introduce you to this system, and I would invite you also to look. And by the way, it's so Islamically, inspired. Even though the founder of this whole system of permaculture, his name was Bill Mollison, and he wasn't a Muslim, but he was so close, to. And I mean, all these basic things that they teach are you'll see the Quran and Hadith, and our scholars, they talk about the same things, And it's interesting that the top man of permaculture, who was also my teacher in permaculture, his name is Jeff Lawton, and his Islamic name is Jalaluddin. He happens to be a Muslim, and he's in Australia. So you can look up the name Jeff Lawton also, and you can get a little introduction to him. GEOFF, GEOFF Lawton, LAWTON, Jeff Lawton. So he has a lot of videos out there, so you can get an idea about permaculture. It's a dynamic thing. It really just fits. It just syncs exactly with what Islam is all about, and it's very Islamically inspired. So we talk about that, and I think it's a wonderful system for getting this planet, back, environmentally healthy. So those are the 6 basic dimensions, the 6 types of trainings that we do, and hopefully, I'd love to actually be able to connect with all of you and go through these trainings with you all, and I'm sure that you'll probably take it much farther than I have. There's people out there. There's an interesting hadith, that somebody has some knowledge that he carries it to somebody who's going to actually apply and become more knowledgeable and use it in a much better way than he does. So that's what I always hope, that I'll be able to connect with all of you, and you can go through these trainings, and you'll take this much farther than I could ever imagine, or anyone for that matter. So summary basically is we need to know our purpose of life, number 1. We need to, secondly, commit to fulfilling that purpose, the life of Ubdiyah. And number 3, we need to develop tools to apply our commitment to this purpose. I mean, we know our purpose, we want to commit, so we need to have tools that are going to facilitate us and help us along the way so that we can commit, effectively to that purpose. And be holistically healthy. We need to be holistically healthy so we can live that purpose with full radiance, with full resilience, with full determination. So being strong in all of these dimensions so that we can actually live that purpose to its max. So we need to commit to achieving holistic health, insha'Allah ta'ala. So let's make dua for that. We can recite Fatihatul Kitab, and we can send salat and durood on Rasul alayhi salatu wassalam, and then we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ask me, I'm here to give you. So we say, oh Allah, make my purpose of life, your continuous servitude, a life of ubudiyah. Make that firm and clear in my mind, heart, and soul. Allah. And oh Allah, give me the tawfiq to commit to that purpose. We won't be able to do that without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's tawfiq. And then, oh Allah, give me tawfiq to commit to changing my life. To really changing my life from this meaningless material life that everybody's living here to really a healthy and meaningful life. Okay? And oh Allah, make me a means to spread and facilitate this healthy, meaningful lifestyle throughout humanity. Make me a means. Khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas. We're the best ummah who has been sent forth for the benefit of the rest of mankind. Oh Allah, Ameen, Ameen, Thumma Ameen. Okay, so I'd love to have you all connect with me, and so you can do that. I just want to introduce the HML. I've introduced you to that whole training system. That's kind of like an introduction that I've just been giving you, and we call that HML as an abbreviation. And then you can also see the Ubdiyah business model, which is a practical application for business. How do we make our business an act of worship, and everything that we do in business an act of worship, so that business becomes a means to getting to Jannah along with everything else that we do. So you can see that also. That's We're going to give you the website for that. So you can connect with me on Facebook and Twitter. Actually, I don't have anything to do with Facebook and Twitter, but some of my students, they manage this for me. They said you need to have the sheikh, so I said okay, fine. So we did that, and so they look after that, and you can connect with me and see what I'm up to and see some useful things, inshallah, on those two platforms. Also, I have a YouTube channel which was recently developed, and that's also under the name of Shaikh Hashim Ahmed. And I've got some YouTube small videos that we've done ourselves, and a lot of them are, YouTube, like sessions like this, sessions I've done in various places in the world, and they've been recorded and they're up there on that channel. Okay, you can also do some of the courses that I just mentioned. The first couple of modules, that's actually, you can do that online from the Udemy, which is, this is the link, www.udemy.com, and you just look for Healthy, Meaningful Lifestyle through Islamic Holistic Health, and there's a course that's offered there. Okay. This is also the Ubdiyah business model. This is the website, ubmtrust.org. You just connect with that. I would recommend just do that right now and then save it. And it'll give you a whole overview of that, and it can show you how you can utilize those services for your business as well, inshallah. Okay, my personal website for this HML Living is hmliving.net. You can see my website. We've got updates on a lot of stuff, a lot of articles, and a lot of things that you can connect to. Courses will also be offered up there. Also, coaching and mentoring, which I do on a one-to-one basic level. People can contact me. We do that. We're also coming up with a group coaching and mentoring service, inshallah. That'll be announced, inshallah. Keep tuned to our website and social media, and we'll be announcing that. Okay, that's my personal email, so you can contact me. I'd love to hear from you. Any comments? If you'd like to, get on our list so that we can send you, our things that we'll be doing, invite you to programs from time to time. Sometimes we have some gifts that we're giving away from time to time. So just send me an email to hashim@hmlliving.net, and I'll get back to you on that. And love to hear from you. And I suppose we would like to have some questions and answers. I don't know how we're going to actually do that. So I guess we can open the floor for that.
Jazakallah, Sheikh, for this wonderful explanation on healthy, meaningful living for Muslims. We have questions. Some of them I'll be highlighting it on the screen also. The number one question here is, give us some tips to remain consistent in our deeds.
Some tips to remain consistent in your deeds. Remain in the company of the people who are consistent in their deeds. That's probably the best advice I can give you. If we will read also the virtues of the good deeds again and again, if we make that a daily habit, this is very critical. When we hear the virtues of things, when we get motivation is something we need all the time. So to remain continuous, we need to be continuously motivated. So if we're hearing, if we have books of fadail, there's various books that are just talk about the virtues of the righteous deeds. So whatever righteous deeds we want to be consistent in, let's hear about them every day. Let's hear with the Quran, something from Quran, from Hadith, something aqwal of our pious ancestors, and that will motivate us. Reading about the life of our pious ancestors, then our Nabi alayhi salam on the top of, obviously, reading the seerah of our Nabi alayhi salam, reading about his life, seeing how he lived his life, that's the most inspirational thing that you can do. And then, his companions and our pious ancestors right up to the present day, okay? And remain as much as possible in the company of people who are consistent, remain in the people of, and that's the order of the Quran. Ya alladhina amanu, ittaqullah wa kunu ma sadiqeen. Fear Allah, adopt taqwa, and remain in the company of the people who are truthful in their iman, in their piety. And that shows through their behavior and through their character,
One other question is, dear Sheikh Saab, can you please clear, is ibadah different for different ummah?
Is ibadah different for different ummah? You mean different shapes
Yeah,
or?
different
Yeah, of
ummahs.
course. Yeah, of
What
course.
yeah.
Yeah. So, um, ibadat, the various types of ibadat that we have. So one thing is, ubudiyah, one is ibadat. Ibadat, what we call the technical ibadats, which are the ritual forms of worship, which we talk about that in detail in our training. Why are those the pillars of Islam, etc. But basically, these rituals, they condition us to become slaves.
Hmm.
That's why they're called ibadat, because they imbue us, they condition us into a conditioning of ubudiyah.
Yeah.
Okay? So those basic forms are salat, som, dhikr, etc. So all the ummats, when I say ummats, the ummats who have been sent prophets and divine books from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, ummat could be an ummat of, ummat of shaitan or ummat of whatever ummat. But when we're talking about ummats who are divinely inspired, the ummats who are the followers of the previous prophets. So they all had these basic forms of ibadah, but the actual shekel, or the exact form, it was developing, and it was somewhat different from time to time. So all
There's
the
a
ummahs had a type of salat, but it wasn't exactly like our salat is probably it is definitely the most refined and version of salat, but the previous ummahs also had a salat that they used to do, although it might have been somewhat different. Yeah.
there's a sequence to that question also. As
Okay.
a ummah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what should be our purpose asking about a link between this ayah about Ubudiyah that you mentioned and the
Yeah.
ayah in Para 4 about Khairul Ummah?
Yeah. What is
So
the
what
link?
will
The
be
link.
the link between those two? Yeah.
You see, we have that's basically two distinct dimensions. One is a dimension between us and our creator. Okay? So we have been created to live a life of ubudiyah. Okay?
Hmm.
Which is servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And among the aspects of servitude to Allah is to serve His creation and to guide His creation and to be a benefit for His creation.
Yeah.
So, being khaira ummatin, being the best ummah sent out to guide, that is part of the overall concept of ubudiyah. That is part of ubudiyah. That is part of our life of ubudiyah. Is that clear?
Yeah, yeah, perfect.
You know?
There's one other question. A lot of people ask this. That is a famous saying is that early to bed, early to rise, but that keeps the person healthy, wealthy, and wise. But what if
Absolutely.
someone cannot rise early due to some work, like overhead during nights, like caring child or crying child, maybe?
You do the best you can. That's all that's required of any of us, right? We do the best we can. Okay, we would be telling you in our trainings, the gold standard, for example, this is the best you can. So what do? You do the best you can. La yukallifullahu nafsan illa wasaha. Okay? So do the best you can, inshallah. And I tell you something though, if you focus on it, you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you also plan your day and night. Don't just plan your work, your to-do list. Plan your day and night from the time that you wake up until the time you sleep. If you've got a plan, it's going to increase your doability at least 50%. I
Hmm.
can guarantee that, inshallah. So plan your day out, and then obviously, but don't get strung out if you're not able to actually implement that plan totally because of unexpected whatever. Particularly our sisters who are challenged with the raising of the children. I mean that.
Yeah.
Just keep in mind that whatever you're going through with raising those children, you're getting a much better reward than probably all of us with our whole night of tahajjud. So keep that in mind. But this is going to require what we call ihtisab. You have to be cognizant that, okay, I'm getting stressed out because of this child, and getting stressed out is having a huge reward. So, oh Allah, I'm happy about that. I'm not necessarily telling you should ask for that. I wouldn't suggest that. But when it comes, I mean, we take it and we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we're grateful for whatever He gives us, because in the end of the day, that's what's better for us. You know?
Jazakallah. Sheikh, there is one other question. How to keep your heart free from hatred, Like if someone has
Oh,
been mean towards us, or how to forget the pain completely and not keep a grudge against him or her.
well, that's a long that's a long story. It's doable, but there's a process involved. Number one process is that number one, what's the benefit of you hating that person, even though he hated you or he did whatever he did to you? What do you get out of it by hating him back? Do you get anything out of that other than more stress, more tension, and also you may be also getting more, wizard. You might be getting, you also be made committing more sin. So what good is that doing you? Absolutely none. It's just hurting you.
Yeah,
So, so if we can just, Nabi Sallallahu also told us, so before you go to sleep, if anybody of you are able to go to sleep, to go to sleep and wake up without having rancor in your heart for anyone, and keep in mind that anyone who's done wrong to you, they didn't really do wrong to you because, number one, if they wronged you in any way, you're going to get a reward for going through that experience.
yeah,
Okay? Because any taklif, any kind of difficulty we face, we're going to get reward for that. But I mean, but we have to, we have to believe that, right? Okay, number two, that, we're going to get reward for that. And number two, this person, so he hasn't really hurt me ultimately, although he might have inflicted some kind of trauma on the moment. But after it's over, and so I'm done with it. But he's going to have to, or she is going to have to face the trauma for that, not only in this world, living with him or herself, with that kind of conscious that they've done whatever they've done, and probably it's going to have nahusa, it's going to have, it's going to be ominous in terms of what it's going to produce in terms of bad results here. And then on the day of judgment, Allahu Akbar, and then perhaps eternally suffering as a result of that. And you, on the other hand, it's just good for you, you know? So that infliction, by bearing it patiently, so I'm getting reward, which maybe I would be more than, my ibadat, which might be flawed and blemished, in so many ways. But by, really saying, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, so I get salawat from Allah and guidance, and rahmah. And and so I've gotten reward for that. And then just keep in mind that so now it's over. Now that person is going to actually, he's going to get it. He or she is in trouble. And they're going to get the nahusat of that action. So we have to kind of reflect. When I talked about cognition, in emotional health, so we have to be cognizant of that. We have to think about our perceptions of things. This person did this to me. He did it. So what? He did it and it's over with, done, gone, Or maybe somebody's continuously harming you. So you're continuously getting more reward, you know? And I know it's easier said than done, but end of the day, if we practice that, we're going to find our life is going to be so stress free,
definitely.
I don't hate anybody. I don't have rancor for anybody, People did anything they did, oh Allah, you take care of it, But so I'm going to be stress free, you know? And if you don't do that, you're going to be, the torture you're going to inflict on yourself is probably even more than what they did to you. So there's no benefit, in him. So it's a good practice just to go to sleep. Oh Allah, excuse everybody, you know. Oh Allah, whoever has any, I have right on anybody, I excuse those rights because, oh Allah, you know what? I want you to make sure that whatever rights that maybe I have on, and maybe whatever hurt I did on anybody else, oh Allah, you'll take care of me there. So if we're gonna be, trying to get back on people here, then maybe, people are gonna be trying to get back on us on the day of judgment. And we're going
Yeah,
to be in need of heavyweight, really, really powerful maghfirat. And so that's a very powerful way of doing that. Oh Allah, I excuse everybody. So Allah excuse me and take care of everybody, whatever rights, they have on me on the day of judgment, you know. So just keep that in mind, and that's a huge wealth, you know.
yeah.
Allah give me and all of us tawfiq for that.
I mean, Sheikh, there is another question. Some people are highly sensitive by birth. Is their emotional health weak?
Is there emotional health? What?
There are some people are highly sensitive by birth. Is their emotional health weak? it, she's trying to ask that there, if there is, their emotional health is weak because they are very sensitive as a person.
Look, there's it's sensitive. I mean, sensitive. You mean that genetically they're made in such a way that they tend to be more? Maybe, but probably there's life experiences that have something to do with that. And there's also sometimes sensitivity and sometimes emotional weakness and sometimes outright psychological maladies are sometimes caused by nutritional deficiencies. Sometimes vitamin D deficiency, it puts people into depression, particularly women. And sometimes we find, so when we're working on all these dimensions, it strengthens, every dimension strengthens the other one. So there's ways to overcome these weaknesses. I mean, there's no weakness, there's no illness that is not overcomable. And Nabi Alayhi Sallam says there is no illness except that Allah has sent not any illness except that He's also sent a cure. Now, what that cure may be, that may be a challenge to find it, but there is definitely a cure. There is a way out for everything. So it's doable. Yeah. So being sensitive, there's no problem for that. We just have to deal with it, understand it, and deal with it appropriately, inshallah.
Okay, Sheikh, there is a question. If we feel we have sinned a lot and we are depressed because of what we of that, what we can do to get the raza of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala? Can you recommend a good book on mannerism of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam?
Yeah. Well, if we've sinned a lot, I mean, is there anybody human being that hasn't sinned a lot? So that's pretty much the state of affairs of every human being. Kullu bani Adam khata. Every son of Adam is someone who profusely sins. Wa khayru khatta'in at-tawwabun. So the best of you who commit a lot of sins are the ones who do a lot of tawbah. You know, so we need to really look into tawbah, istighfar and tawbah, and actually by istighfar and tawbah, all of those sins are not only forgiven, they're actually transformed into righteous deeds. I mean, wow. I mean, it's like win, forever. So, that's not a reason to be despondent. It doesn't mean that, we should be la parwa. It doesn't mean that, we're not going to be, we should be concerned about that. We should be feel sorrow, but we shouldn't get overwhelmed by that. There's a way out. Alhamdulillah. With this istighfar and there's tawbah. So I would recommend that you read about istighfar and tawbah, and there's many good books. Actually, most of my experience and most of my work is in the Arabic language. So there must be some good books, that describe tawbah. If you find the book, which you can be looking, I also I am translating. I have a series that actually it's kind of a loose translation and moving along with the format of Minhaj al-Abidin, which is the way of the worshippers. It's a book of Imam Ghazali. And I started a series of articles for the Intellect magazine years ago. And then, so I put those back up on my website, the ones that I had already done. And so we're going to be writing about that. So we talk about Toba in detail there. And uh, this specific, circumstance where people keep committing sins, and, we do Toba and then we go back to it. This happens a lot. And so there's a way to deal with that. So you might find that book Minhaj al-Abidin and see the section of Toba, it's repentance, and I think it's translated in Urdu and it's translated in English as well. So you can see that, and be looking for we're going to be publishing on the website that series on Toba also, inshallah, soon. So be looking for that, inshallah. Yeah. Don't despair though.
Okay.
Everybody sins a lot.
Sheikh,
Don't despair. There's a way out, inshallah.
there's another question. What type of activities could you channel your energies towards that would satisfy you deep down?
So that's a pretty fast, a pretty general question.
Yeah,
I mean,
we have already explained this in the whole of our workshop. So maybe one or two looks like some young guy has asked this question.
okay, so so one of the things that people need to do is they need to know where their talents and where their passions and interests lie, you know. And within the framework of all these things that we're teaching, take up when we talked about, the when we talked about occupation, profession, life support systems, so if we know where our the type of interests that we have in particular things, particular areas, and skill sets that we may have or that we think we can develop, so we work in those areas, like before Islam, I was a professional musician, and I thought that was my purpose of life, and I thought that for the first 20 some years of my life, from the time I was about 4 years old. And so everything I was doing was focused on music. Now, after I accepted Islam, so people said, so did you leave music? I said, well, I just went to a higher form. So leaving that kind of music towards the study of the Quran and Hadith and the Arabic language, which itself is like music. I mean, it's just amazing, So we have interests, we have passions, and we have, skill sets and abilities, talents, God given. I mean, they're given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we understand those and we try and channel them, in, along the guidelines of Ubdiyah, then we're
Yeah.
going to have a win-win. A lot of times what happens, the reason I'm saying that, and particularly here in Pakistan, people are generally, what profession are you in? I'm in business. Why? Because that's what our family does. So, are you interested in business? I mean, you're not really. So then, why are you doing? Anyway, that's opening up a whole thing, and then okay, how do we deal with that with the family and but just as well, for example, somebody's in engineering school. Why are you in engineering school? Because my father's an engineer. My grandfather's an engineer. Are you really interested in being an engineer? I mean, I'm not saying that's good or bad. That could be
Hmm.
wonderful. You're doing useful stuff for humanity, and you put a good intention with that, and then you follow rules of Sharia. I've got stories about that, also. So that's wonderful. But I mean, if you're not even interested in that, and actually you're interested in something else, so it's gonna cause a lot of problems,
Yeah.
you know, and they might really be destructive, or you might be able to control it. But I would, try and so the win-win situation here is to understand what talents Allah has given me, what natural instincts, what am I leaning towards, and work in that area in the context of the teachings of a life of Ubudiyya, you know
Sheikh,
Allah give.
one last question is that I'm sure that you have been asked this many times in your life, but if you could kindly brief us on what led you to revert to Islam.
Yeah, well, for that you need another session. That's a long story. In fact, you can see that. Okay, what you can do, you might not have another session with me, or you might not on that topic, but you can go to my YouTube channel, and I've given this story shorter and longer on several. One of them was at Lums, one of them was in America, in different places. So you can just see on my YouTube channel in detail, and I talk
How,
about my whole journey to Islam.
Sheikh, how
Yeah.
about having you another time for having a complete session on how you revert to Islam?
Okay,
Or-
if you really want to do that, then I don't have a problem with that. Inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. I hope that all those who have listened to this entire workshop will get benefit from this, and this will be recorded on our YouTube channel also. So those who will listen in future will be benefit from this, and I pray that whole entire ummah will get benefit from this sessions and your effort, and may Allah accept all our deeds and everything
Allahumma.
that we said. Jazakallah.
Okay. Okay. So can I just have one request? So
Yeah.
that last page, which had all the contact information,
Hmm.
okay,
Yeah.
you know, so that
Huh.
that slide, do you have that slide, or should I send that to you, or what?
We have it. We have it.
We have it. We have it.
Okay. So if you can take that slide and
Hmm.
put that up on the channel, so if people want to connect with me, they have more questions. People might
Sure.
have questions they
Sure.
weren't able to contact or what have you, so
Hmm.
they can actually contact me, and they can they can contact
Definitely,
you.
we'll take a screenshot and we'll post on Facebook also,
Okay.
and we'll do this on same or YouTube also.
Okay, that's great. Jazakumullah kulla khair. Barakallah.
Barakallah, it was great to have you here.
بارك
Barakallah.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.